Welcome to Open Chain Mobility. Open chain mobility allows us to focus on priming the systems and allowing to get oxidation and circulation through the joints. We start with spinal rolling. Start to roll down vertebra by vertebra. And as you come up, exactly the same, roll up vertebra by vertebra. The goal is to focus on segmental movement of the spine, keeping the legs nice and long in the back with a gentle bend in the knees to support the movement of the pelvis. Let's look at this from the side profile. So again, as we tuck under, you'll notice that we're just folding over the legs. And as we roll back up, we bend the knees slightly and then wave the spine back up. So each segment of the spine builds on the next. Let's do one more. Again, remembering the head and the arms should be heavy throughout this pattern. Moving into our forward fold, we're going to focus on posterior weight shift. So allowing the weight to come forward and then back to the heels allows us to get a greater degree of stretch and release through our back line. It also allows us to feel that interaction with the fascial system. Moving on to our side spinal rolls, we roll down one more time as transition. And as we roll over to one side, the goal is to push that hip through. So as we go over towards our right side, we want to be pushing that right hip. And as we come over to the left, we're pushing through the left hip. Again, stacking the shoulders upon the rib cage upon the pelvis. This allows us to open up again those lateral lines and tight tissue between the rib cage and the hips. Good, let's rolling back up to standing. Moving into our pelvis with our hip root. Keeping the knees slightly soft, we allow the hips to drive out at a 45-degree angle with a slight squat, making sure we still keep the trunk nice and tall. The hands reach out to help counterbalance through that rotation, as well as to help elongate the musculature in and around the lateral lines. And again, allowing us to get a greater degree of movement into the hip joints. Lateral flexion, again focusing on the spine. As we drive one arm up, we anchor and drive the opposite arm down, remembering that as we're pulling, we're also pushing at the same time. So the shoulders remain stable, the hips remain that levering point for the spine to elongate and lengthen. Exhale as you open, inhale back to center. Remembering breath helps to prime the movement. Thoracic vertical rotations. We keep the knees soft and hips square. As we drive to open, we want to reach the hand to the back, and for the first couple repetitions, just allow the natural movement so that you can identify pockets of tension. As you continue to rotate, then start to square those hips off a little bit more so that you can isolate the thoracic spine, an area that tends to get quite jammed up. Keeping the elbows up allows us to get a little bit more movement through the rib cage. And then integrating a little bit more of an overhead reach to again prime that scapular mobility, allowing the shoulder blade to move easily across and down the rib cage. Good, moving on to our lower limbs, single leg stance. We start by drawing the knee into the chest, driving through that stability leg, keeping it nice and straight. If you feel comfortable, you can release the knee, driving the palms to the floor to engage that full back line. If you're comfortable here, straighten the leg. Good, let's repeat that on the other side. Single leg stance allows us to not only focus on that singular stability, but it's also a great testing protocol to see how your hip flexion on one side and keeping that stability and extension on the other, we have that reciprocal relationship. Good, let's do that for one more round either side. So draw that knee in. Notice we point the toe up towards the face, initiating that hip flexion. And again, work to keep that stability leg straight. So weight to the heel as well as to the big toe and the baby toe. Tripod of the foot. Good. Moving on to our hacky sack. This allows us to get a little bit more rotation through not only the hip, but the knee and the ankle. We drive the heel up, and then internally rotate and externally rotate the heel back. This one takes a little bit more degree of movement, so just go with what you feel is natural. You'll probably feel that the hip is a little sticky. Know that that's okay. Tissues in and around the sacrum and the lumbar, and especially muscles that attach to the TFL, can get quite tight. So really focus on driving that medial edge, inside edge of the foot up, and that lateral edge in the heel on the way back. Good, let's release those knees with some knee circles. So we're going to marry the toes so the feet are together, and then slow circles. Again, we want to stay grounded through the feet here, so those big toes are staying rooted, and as we circle and come up, focus on lifting the arch. Good, this primes us for the Tootsie Roll. We draw the knees together, and then drive the knees apart, pulling the hips up in the back. This one is also known as I gots to go potty, and I'm gonna ride the fat horse. So that lateral rotation and internal rotation allows us to get a deeper amount of movement through the 3 lower limb joints, ankles, knees, and hips. Let's look at it from the side. So again, we wanna make sure those hips stay back, spine stays nice and tall, and we allow those knees to come a little bit further so we can get a real nice hinge position in those knees. This is also a great mobility drill for the feet. Going back to our single leg stance, we're going to get a little heat into the system. Single leg, lateral hold. So we draw that right leg out, and the goal here is notice that foot is turned forward, not out. We again keep that stability leg nice and straight. You can go ahead and switch sides. And you want to try to make sure that your upper body doesn't collapse. So you're only going to raise that leg as far as you can maintain optimal alignment of the spine to the pelvis. This is a great way to engage and activate the glutes, as well as return to that single leg stance. Good, moving on to the stork. Again, a nice isometric hold. So we hold these for a little longer. We're going to challenge that single leg stance, almost similar to a bit of a single leg deadlift. So we're priming that rotation into the system. We drive the heel back, making sure that we also drive the heel towards the floor. We're not looking for height here. We want the heel in alignment with the hip, the shoulders, and the head. As we bring the knee forward, that allows us to get a bit of a gentle stretch through the posterior line. Think about driving those hands towards the floor so the shoulders can also focus on counterbalancing the rotation in the system. Let's go ahead and switch sides. Again, we're priming to engage those glutes, but also connect the glutes to the trunk and the trunk to the shoulders. Good, moving on to the airplane. So this one looks at a little bit more rotation at the hip. This also takes a greater degree of rooting down through the foot. So we start similar to our stork, but then we open up laterally. Now what can happen here is as you open the hip, the knee wants to fall in. This is where we really have to stay rooted to the feet. So think about pulling the arch up of that stability leg. Only go to where you feel comfortable. Again, we're not focused on height here. We're focused on that lateral rotation of opening up the hip. If you feel comfortable, you can drive the arms out. Another option is to use the wall. The wall allows us to have that base of support so that we can have a greater degree of rotation without compromising the integrity or having to get the wobble fest. So we open that hip up, and again, that foot is facing forward. Go ahead and switch sides. We'll try that for a couple more rounds. This drill is great for getting opening into the deep fascial connections of the pelvis and the hips. This also allows us to release a little bit into the lower lumbar. Now press pause and repeat as necessary.